American President Donald Trump is creating a huge Ukraine victory fund which will be financed by China. In fact, Donald Trump intends to fill the special fund with money from the revenues of new tariffs on China, and later, with this money, buy an indecent amount of weapons for the armed forces of Ukraine. And Trump didn't choose the name Victory Fund by accident, because according to insiders, he is confident that if Vladimir Putin, whom he spoke with on the phone today, doesn't agree to reasonable negotiations to end the war, then the only way the war will end is with Ukraine's victory. The Telegraph now reports this is no longer just an idea, as Donald Trump has told his finance minister Scott Bessent to present the developed plan to the European Union. And this, in Trump's opinion, is the answer to the Europeans, who should use frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine and finally give up Russian energy resources. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is October 16th. And before we start this episode, I want to urge you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like and write a comment, any detailed comment under this episode. This really helps promote the video on YouTube, and if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel financially, donate using the links in this video's description. It clearly states support the channel Alexei Pechi. Use any format that works for you. I appreciate any support you give. In addition, I encourage you to subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, Donald Trump, who previously stated that Zelensky has no chance of a military victory, that Ukraine has no leverage, and so on, is now increasingly losing patience with Vladimir Putin. And his proposal to move the war onto Russian territory marks a significant shift in his position. You recall Donald Trump suggesting it's time to hit Russia hard or Ukraine won't win by staying defensive. On October 15, Trump states that Ukraine is planning to go on the offensive, and he and Zelensky will be discussing this issue on October 17. And now Trump's statement was repeated by Pete Hegseth, the United States Secretary of Defense, who said at a meeting of NATO colleagues in Brussels that the United States is ready to support Kiev in ways that only the United States can if Russia continues to avoid peace negotiations in Brussels. And today, the United States Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, really surprised many people with his statement. As people discussed Tomahawks and the Putin-Trump negotiations, Bessent made a statement, and I quote, "President Trump instructed the ambassador and me to inform our European allies that we will support any name. We are either the Russian oil tariff or the Ukrainian victory tariff for China. But our Ukrainian or European allies must be ready to follow their example. We will respond if our European partners join us." What is Trump proposing and what is Bessent saying? So, according to Bessent, the strategy provides for a 500% tariff on imports from China, and the funds received will be used to purchase weapons for the Ukrainian army. Well, I don't really believe in these 500%, but you get the idea. If Europe agrees to work together with the United States, then Washington is ready to impose draconian tariffs on China. These tariffs will be sent to a special fund, which will be used exclusively to purchase weapons for Ukraine. The plan is designed to put maximum economic pressure on Vladimir Putin, whose war machine depends on support from China so that he will come to the negotiating table with Trump and Zelensky. Well, that's it. Diplomatic sources in Washington told the Telegraph that the idea of imposing sanctions on China for purchasing Russian oil had previously faced obstacles from European governments. NATO members called Beijing a determined accomplice in Russia's war against Ukraine, but many alliance member states, including the United Kingdom, refused to call China an enemy. Ukrainian Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal told allies on Wednesday that Ukraine would need $120 billion to fund another year of armed resistance in 2026. And it would be strange not to take money for this war from those who sponsor Putin and his aggression against Ukraine. And yesterday's discussion at NATO headquarters, which was co-chaired by the United Kingdom, focused on how to raise half of that amount. Here are $120 billion which, according to Shmyhal, should be provided specifically by our allies, the allies of Ukraine. The second important issue was the transfer of long-range missiles that our partners possess. Everyone already knows the name of these missiles. It is expected that the supply of Tomahawk missiles will become the main issue on the agenda of the talks between Zelensky and Trump as early as Friday. But it is also known that by supplying Tomahawks, Trump is trying to force German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to finally hand over the Taurus missiles. It's similar to the tanks. The Germans will give up Taurus missiles, but only if the Americans deliver theirs first. And this will show that they are not the only ones escalating. It was the same back then. The Germans were ready to hand over Leopard 1Mi tanks, but only after the Americans symbolically delivered a batch of Abrams. It's the same story here. And then Trump says that Ukraine is about to go on the offensive, for which they will need Tomahawks and more weapons for the front. Sources in European NATO countries stated that they support this move, which will give Ukraine more opportunities to strike Russian targets deep behind the front lines. But they admit that the decision is made solely by the President of the United States. If Trump agrees, it is expected that European countries will have to pay for both the missiles and the training under the NATO Plural scheme, under which American weapons are supplied to Ukraine at the expense of European governments. And here it's worth quoting Pete Hegseth, who made it clear that Washington is ready to provide Ukraine with the firepower needed to achieve, as he put it, peace through strength. Quote, "If there's one thing we learned under President Trump, it's the active use of force to establish peace. Peace is achieved through strength, not harsh words or finger wagging. It's achieved through strength when you have real and significant capabilities that your adversaries respect. If this war doesn't end, if there's no path to peace in the short term, then the United States, together with our allies, will take the necessary steps to make Russia pay for its ongoing aggression." If we have to take this step, the United States Department of Defense is ready to contribute in ways that only the United States can. And here I'll note that in the months following the fruitless negotiations with Putin in Alaska, Trump began to support Ukraine more actively. And last month, he shocked Zelensky by stating that Kyiv, quote, "is capable of fighting and restoring all of Ukraine to its original form." Although earlier, as you remember, he was adamant that Ukraine would have to cede territory to Russia as the price for any peace agreement. Well, and Trump is now working in coordination with his partners. For example, on Wednesday, October 15, the British government imposed sanctions against the two largest Russian oil companies. These are Lukoil and Rosneft, also 51 tankers from the Shadow Fleet. So, these two companies are considered strategically important for the Kremlin. Because Rosneft is the largest oil producer in Russia, accounting for about 40% of the country's total production, well, and Lukoil is the second largest company with the greatest presence abroad among its domestic counterparts. So, if other European countries follow Britain's example, then Trump will have no choice but to implement his plan for the Victory Fund for Ukraine. I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now.